Welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue development on our crypto portfolio tracking app. So after last video, some of you may notice that because we're using the free CoinGecko API, there are inconsistencies of retrieving the feed at times, and that leads to an error in the importJSON function that our app is connected to. So our app will oftentimes show references that have been disconnected between the name reference table, and clicking into each asset will show that the values aren't being captured because obviously it can't retrieve the price for those assets. To solve for these issues, so we're going to create some tables that's going to store the API data automatically so that the app will always have data to present. So when these error messages occurs, the data is still accessible to the app based off the last update. And then we could run automations to update this from the API as needed to keep our data current. So we're going to make a table that copies all new records into another table that AppSheet can reference. We'll make a duplicate of this table, and then we will copy the data here and then paste the values. So we're removing the function in this new table, and we're just keeping the data that was associated with the API. And we'll call this asset list cached. So with that table added, we could come and refresh our application in the app editor and then add the asset list cache table to our application. So now with these tables added, we're going to go in and reestablish our references now. So for asset name, we're going to change the reference to the asset list cache table. So now our app is pointed at those tables that will be persistent even though the API feed may not be retrieved at times. Now the next step is we obviously need to update the cache table on a frequency basis to retrieve the new values from the API feed and update the cache table. So we're going to create an automation for that. And we'll start by creating a new bot. And this bot's going to run on a scheduled basis. We're going to configure this event, and this event's going to run on a daily update. And we'll click schedule, choose daily, pick a time that's suitable for you, and we'll check for each row in the table. So we're going to check for each row in the table because we want AppSheet to essentially compare whether the record is in the cache table or not, to know whether it's updatable or not. We're going to choose for each row in the table because we want AppSheet to compare states for each record in the table before deciding on what action to take. For the table, we're going to choose asset list. We'll start with the asset list table. And for the filter condition for asset list specifically, we want to check to see if the value exists in the cache table. If it exists in the cache table, then we don't need to copy it over. We're going to check for the ID because that's the unique value in the table, and we're going to compare that against the asset list cached. And we're going to want that to not be true. So basically what we're saying here is this event will become true if AppSheet does not find the ID in the cache table. Next, we're going to create the process for this. And this process is going to be very simple. We're going to create a custom step. And in this step, we're going to run a data action, and we're going to create a new action. And this action is going to be to copy new records to asset list cache table. And we're going to choose add new rows. So we're going to add new rows to the asset list cache table. And then we're going to populate the values of this table accordingly with the same fields. So it's a one-for-one translation between the two tables because we have the exact same structure we're mirroring. So with that done, we've completed our automation that will run on a daily basis and retrieve any new assets that appear in the API itself. We'll make sure we give these processes a name accordingly and these steps to make it easier to reference in the future. So the next step is going to be to set up an automation where we can update the current prices of the assets in our asset list table and other relevant information that we want to pull from the API itself. So we're going to check out our data structure first for the asset table. And we're going to scroll down to the two columns that we're currently using to retrieve the asset price and place them and display them in our application. And this is asset price V and image columns. So we're going to rename these so we can reference this easier. We're going to call this asset price API. And we're going to call this image API because if you recall from the previous video, these are simple lookups from the asset price table that is connected to the API. So if the table is not retrieved and comes up with an error retrieving the values from the API, then these values will also be empty, and that leads to the event that does not display images and the prices properly in the application itself. So what we want to do with an automation is we're essentially want to copy values from the API and update from the asset price table and update the asset price and an image field, which we haven't added yet. So we're going to jump over to the table real quick. And in our asset table, we're going to add, in addition to price, we're going to add image field. And then we will regenerate the table. And then you'll notice AppSheet throws an error because we had a formula in the USD value that referenced that asset price V column here. And since we're creating an automation now to update the asset price column, we'll just reference that directly now and update this formula. So with this table structure updated, we can go ahead and set up our automation. Call this daily price update. Call this daily asset table event. And we're going to want this to run on a schedule, just like our other asset list table. And we want it to run for each row in the table itself. I'm going to make sure that's associated with the asset table. And then for the filter condition, we need to check to make sure that there is an API value that is available. If we do not check for that, then AppSheet in this automation could essentially populate a blank value, which we don't want to do because we're trying to avoid that right now. So for our condition itself, what we want to make sure is with our API price field here, we want to make sure that this is not blank. If it's blank, that means that virtual column that we created for the API here does not exist in the API table, and therefore we're going to check to see if this actually has a value in it. And if it does have a value, then we can assume that the table is being populated and the API feed has been retrieved in the table. And then for the process itself, we're going to update prices from the API. We'll create that as a custom step. We're going to run a data action on the table. And we're going to create a new action for this table. So this action is going to be to set row values. So as AppSheet goes through every single record in the table, we're going to then grab the new API price. And then under set these columns, we simply want to choose our two columns of interest. Those would be the asset price and image fields. And we will point those at the asset price API and the image API accordingly. So now we've completed this action to where on a daily basis, this automation will run and it will update the price and image fields from the API if the asset price API column is not blank. We'll go ahead and hit save. Oh, I forgot to add symbol into this automation that we set up. So just real quick, repeat the same process and we can add a new virtual column here called symbol API, just like with our other two API columns. And we will basically reference the symbol value from the API table. And then we'll add that to our automation. And also clean up our actions that we made. Since none of those actions that we made in our automations, we don't need them to show to the users of the application, and we can go ahead and make sure that we don't display those. And then we'll unhide the asset price value and hide these API feeds just to prevent any confusion. And now we'll come run our daily price update and see how our app updates accordingly. So we'll notice that the price has been updated, and we now have a last updated field as well. And we can come in here and clean up our detail view as well. And then we'll change it to a card layout, a little bit easier to display more relevant information. And that's a little cleaner looking. We'll hide the actions for now. So with our view cleaned up, that's looking pretty good. And now with these automations in place, we won't run into issues if the backend sheet can't pull the API data. With that, that concludes part 6 of building your own crypto portfolio tracking app. So with this section done, we will continue to build out our application with notifications and ways to monitor for value changes to make it easier for you to identify assets as they appreciate or depreciate. Thanks everybody for watching. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and have a great one.